Hello everyone, happy Valentine's Day. Hope you're having a great day and hopefully you're not having to cook this evening, that maybe there's going to be another alternative option for you on Valentine's Day. We are celebrating here in the Kansas City area. Topeka's only about an hour from Kansas City, so we are over the moon about the results of the Super Bowl. It's really fun. So Chiefs, there's a big parade tomorrow. They're expecting 500,000 people in downtown Kansas City. I won't be there. I don't think anybody from here is going, but it's always just a fantastic thing to watch on TV. So, this is the month of promoting the second round of work for the Now shirt pattern. And this is the garment for our So Confident project this month. Are we not? No sound?
They're not hearing you. All right, try again.
All right. Let me know if you can hear me now. And I will semi-start over. We may have to get our, still not hearing me? Okay. Well, that's interesting. Hello, everyone. I'm going to start over and wish you a nice, happy Valentine's Day. And I was talking about the fact that our favorite team, the Kansas City Chiefs, won the Super Bowl. So we're celebrating here in the Topeka, Kansas City area. We're not going to the parade tomorrow. They're expecting 500,000 people in downtown Kansas City. I won't be there, but boy, it's going to be quite a celebration. So for you Philadelphia Eagles fans, we're very sorry, but it was a great game. So we are into February, which is our second month of working with the Now shirt pattern for So Confident. And the first month we used some feather whale corduroy to make a jacket with some new bands at the bottom and cuffs and pockets and all of that. But this month we're using the Now shirt pattern and making it out of a totally different fabric. It's called silk shantung. This is the jacket behind me, and I use the fabric as it comes off the bolt, unwashed. And so silk shantung is the cousin of silk dupioni, but it has a smoother flavor to it. It doesn't have as many slubs in it as we know that silk dupioni is all about. So it has a somewhat dressier look. There's a little bit of a sheen, but if you wash the fabric, then it totally cuts that sheen. It totally changes the character of how it drapes, and it gives it sort of a crepe flavor and makes it, in my opinion, more casual. So it kind of depends on how you want to use the garment. We are using some pintucks down the front and down the back, and using metallic thread. That's included in the kit, although you can use any thread that you want, and I've been getting lots of interesting emails from people about other threads that they're using, and of course posts on the private Facebook page as well. We have this very unique way of making this faux binding down the front and around the collar and at the bottom of each sleeve. And these are pieces of pieced silk dupioni, 3 colors. There's a plaid and a blue and a hot pink. And those have been pieced to make this really unique way of making this binding. So you have to watch the video to find out how to do that, but I hope that you all, those of you who are members of the yearly So Confident, of course you have already gotten your video. It came out, I believe, last Friday, or maybe I'm a week off, I'm not sure. I thought I might be a week off. But if you want to, you can still sign up for the monthly class and sign up to just take this class and learn how to do the pin tucks, how to do the binding, buttonholes, how to change the pattern into more of a swing shape rather than a boxy shape. So you learn all kinds of things in this particular class. So that's this month's So Confident. There's also still time to sign up for this Coverstitch class that I did maybe about a month ago. It was a live Zoom class, but we recorded it, and so you can now take the class. It's only $10, and I give you everything I know about cover stitching, which is, of course, not everything to know about cover stitching, but I tried to focus on the actual techniques about cover stitching that I actually use in my fashion sewing. So I hope you'll still check that out. It's on our website, Coverstitch Class. All right, so today we are talking about the Helix top. We always talk about the Helix pants because it's one of our favorite pants patterns, our slim pant that you make out of some sort of a stretch fabric, either a stretch woven that has a lot of stretch to it, or you make it out of a pretty stable knit, either one. But today we're talking about the top. And this all started with a conversation that I was having with Erin. We have these beautiful striped fabrics that have been sitting on the shelf, and we got them from a company that custom makes stripes for manufacturing. So they're really high quality, and they tend to be in school colors. So they're called Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Kansas State, whatever. But you'll find the stripes that are used in these sort of sportswear, so to speak, these various colleges. But anyway, we have this group of striped knits that I have been enchanted with for a while and wanted to make something really nice. So I found this garment on the website. Actually, it came in a magazine from Artful Home. And I know a lot of you follow this particular company because they have a lot of styles that I think really relate to how we dress here at the Sewing Workshop as well. So Erin and I were studying this picture, and I said, well, you know, what do you think? Do you think that's the swing tee that we could modify, the E tee, the Picasso top? We had all kinds of ideas going. And then all of a sudden, Erin says, you know, it would be great in a Helix top. And I went, bingo, that's what we should do. You know, not everyone wants to wear their stripes absolutely perfectly horizontal. So with the Helix top, then what happens is when you cut this out, the stripes become on the diagonal. There's nothing you can, I don't even know if you could do it with the stripes going crosswise. You probably could, but it would take some figuring out, which who wants to do that? So we decided to combine the colors basically that we had seen in this picture, these beautiful blues and black, dark blues, and this great, you know, my kind of color of this pop of yellow, mustard, green yellow. I wish I had a better word for this kind of color. It's not chartreuse. What is this color?
Mustard, maybe?
Mustard. I know that this color is showing up a little bright on the screen. It's much more subdued in person than it is on the screen. We have, I don't know why, but with our camera and Facebook and all of that, sometimes the colors are just a little bit off. And so that's showing up too bright. But at any rate, I have on a Helix top that actually has 3 fabrics. It has this one, which is a dark, dark, dark blue and a sort of a subtle dark turquoise pinstripe at about 1.25 inches apart. And then the other one that I have on is this one, which is just kind of the reverse of the colors. The blue for the background and then a dark, dark blue. I don't know. I read it as black sometimes. I honestly can't tell whether it's, well, what do we say it is? I guess I should look on the, it's black. Okay. And then this steel blue, we'll call it steel blue. So I'm using it with this, and then some insertions of trim in this mustard color. And I think this is just, I love it. I think it's fantastic. So sometimes you can look at a picture of something that you see on the internet or in a magazine or a catalog or in a store or wherever, and you think, well, I'm going to go home and make that. And you end up not making that, but it leads you to other choices and gets you to another place that you might not have thought of. That's exactly the kind of topic that you're going to be reading about in a soon to be published Threads article, all about where you get your inspirations for what you want to sew. So kind of watch for that. So I'm going to show you some things about this pattern that are quite unique and how you can work with this pattern and make a few just a couple of modifications to it. So behind me is the front pattern piece to this pattern. You can tell have you ever seen anything quite like this? You know, there's no just front or back or sleeve or collar. This is the shape of the front. And there's another pattern piece underneath it that is the actual shape of the back. And really the only difference is in the neckline. Otherwise, they're very identical. So this is a pattern that you probably just can't intuitively put together without the guide sheet. You have to follow our instructions and do the seaming exactly in the order that we have talked about, or I don't think it's going to work out. And I don't even remember how we figured out how to sew it, to tell you the truth. But it turns into this swirl, thus we called it the helix. And so these two pieces kind of wrap around, and the front ends up being a sleeve and the back ends up being another sleeve, and you just have to trust the process with our guide sheet and know that it does work. I happen to really like the way this fits. This is pretty much the way it is out of the pattern in terms of fit. This is a size small. I can also wear a medium, and you can really do some things with this in terms of length. You can turn it into a little bit of a longer tunic. This has been lengthened 4 inches, I think it was. And I see this is the back. See, you can't tell. Doesn't really matter. I took the neck binding piece and simply made it taller, wider, and that became the cowl. So I didn't have to reinvent or remeasure or figure out what size to make this cowl piece. You already have it in the pattern. So all I did here was accentuate these seams with some hand stitching, a little bit of sashiko running stitch that is straddling that stitch seam, just to highlight the fact that this is an interesting seaming. All right, so take a look at this sleeve. I don't know the dimension of this sleeve, but after having made this a couple of times, I've realized that this sleeve is a little wider than I want it. It felt a little floppy and a little, maybe just too, in the proportion of how I wanted to see the silhouette on my body, I felt like the sleeve was too big. So I've been cutting that down and making it a little bit narrower, and I like it better. So let's talk about this pattern a little bit. When you get this out, the only way to orient yourself on this pattern is to figure out that there is a neckline. So you can always find the top of the pattern by that curve. And there is a line that is indicated, and it says center front. So you know where that pattern sits on you. Center front, and the same thing happens at the center back. There's a line that says center back as well. So normally, this garment takes 2 yards of fabric to make. And for a while, because of sort of this option for how you can lay it out, we would always say, well, you need, if you're going to make it in 2 different fabrics, you need 2 yards of one fabric and 2 yards of another fabric. Well, we finally figured out that on knits, if you have a knit that has stretch in both directions, a 4-way stretch that's fairly equal, or at least enough stretch, that you can cut this out on the cross grain in every size, from extra small to XXL. And that means that you can get, if you're using 2 fabrics, you only have to have 1 yard of each fabric. So that was a revelation to us, and a nice, pleasant one, to tell you the truth. So when you're doing that, if you're using this on the cross grain, then this is the grain line that you want to use. And all you have to do is just line that up on a horizontal stripe. And the work is done for you from then on. So notice that this straight of grain is essentially parallel with this. And I think it's actually important that this is maintained as parallel so that the stripe is lined up at this seam nice and evenly. I think if I were to measure that, it might be like 1/8 of an inch off or something like that, but I would shift that so that this is parallel with this. All right, so then you want to narrow the sleeves. Well, how do you do that and where is that? All right, well, first of all, you have to determine what size you want the circumference of the sleeve. And I took a tape measure and put it around my wrist and figured out that I wanted it to be finished, excuse me, at 9 inches, 9 inches circumference. Now, you can determine that however you want. Maybe you have something in your closet that you can measure that you already know you like the circumference of, but for me, it was just tape measure around the wrist. So 9 inches. So I had to find the center of the sleeve. Well, this clearly says right here, right sleeve. So I know this is the sleeve portion of the pattern piece. And since I knew I was making a small, then I measured the center of the bottom line on the small. So this line represents the center of the sleeve. So if I wanted a 9-inch circumference, I could measure 4.5 inches each direction and then add 5/8 of an inch to each one for seam allowances. So that's that point right here and right here. Now, I didn't want to do anything with the seam under the arm. I didn't want to get into any of this curve thing, so I figured out that the small line is right here, and right at the point where this straightens out is when I connected it to my new width at the bottom. So you just run that ruler right straight into where it dies into the curve. This line is not curved, the one I drew. And the same thing applies here. So this curve begins to straighten right here. So now I'm coming down and meeting that point that represents that 9-inch circumference plus seam allowances. So it's really actually quite easy. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but the sleeve on the right sleeve has these pieced sections, which I think is a nice, and that was actually something that was borrowed from that Artful Home garment. So this has a 5/8 inch hem allowance, which I preserved. I marked that. And then this piece, the first piece, is 3.5 inches. So you would take a piece of tracing paper, lay it on top of this, trace this shape, and add 5/8 of an inch. Then the next piece, the mustard one, is 2 3/4 inches finished. So you would trace that section and add a seam allowance and add a seam allowance. So you're sewing this to this, and you're sewing this to this, and you have something to sew to. And then this sleeve piece has to have a seam allowance added here. I'm sure you all know how to figure that out. But these are the proportions: 5/8 inch hem, 3.5 inches for the first piece, and 2 3/4 inches for the second piece. And then you add seam allowances to make it all connect. So the same thing happens on the back side, on the back. Okay, I could have sworn, here it is. All right. So let's get this out of the way. So the back piece is essentially the same. And in this case, the piecing is done here. So this stripe was repeated at the bottom part of this sleeve. So there's a seam right here. So same thing, the sleeve was narrowed in the very same way as the front. Found the center of the sleeve on this one, measured my 4.5 plus 2 seam allowances, measured the 5/8 inch hem allowance, and then measured 12 inches up and drew a line perpendicular to that straight of grain. This is, I consider, the straight of grain on that sleeve. So again, I tried to not get into the curve too much, a little bit, but you would trace this section, add a seam allowance to this part, and then you would add a seam allowance this direction for the body of the garment. So each sleeve is done in a different way, and it's really, I think it's pretty cool. All right, so now we have some trim. So the first time I did trim on the garment was a while back, and I used this. I used a stripe. And this particular stripe is an interlock, so it does not curl. It lies flat. So this insertion was pretty easy to do. I just used a single piece of fabric. I get my little chart over here. A single piece of fabric that was cut, I have to think about this, 7/8 wide. I wanted it to be 3/8 of an inch wide exposed. I wanted to put it on the seam allowance of 5/8 of an inch, so that would be 7/8, right?
An inch.
That's an inch.
Yeah.
5/8 and 3/8.
3/8 would be 8/8.
1 inch. Ooh, I told you math wasn't my thing.
We're still
All right.
recovering.
Yeah, I have to count all those little lines on the ruler whenever I do this sort of thing. All right. So this is the right side of the fabric, and I have just laid this down using my fusee web in the seam allowance, so it's not going to creep on me. And I've set my presser foot so that the left-hand edge of the presser foot is along the one raw edge on the left-hand side. Position my needle position one way or the other so that my eye is following the left edge of the trim, and the needle is just doing its job at 3/8 of an inch. Now I'm going to baste that on. So that's the way that one was done. But this garment that I have on, this fabric, is a jersey, and it curls. It curls actually to the right side. We have this on the wall. They're rolled backwards. But you can see that it rolls to the right side. And so you have to decide if the curl is what you want, if that's the look that you want. One of the garments that I found in our inventory was this trio top. This is a trio t-shirt pattern. This was made by Karen Turnow a long time ago, actually. And she has inserted single layer flat strips of jersey in the seams. But the fact that it is a jersey and it curls, now it looks like it's a tube. So it's not lying flat. That's a different application. And there's nothing wrong with this. This would be really cool in the seam. But if you don't like that and you want to keep the look like this, where the piping is flat, then you need to double it. And so this is how this shirt was done. So the white shirt was done like this, and the shirt I have on was done like this. And in this case, you cut this. Yeah, forget that 7/8. I just saw that. Okay. That's going to drive you crazy. Yeah.
Correct.
But
right.
at any rate, 2 inches wide, I hope I'm right. 3/8 and 3/8 and 5/8 and 5/8, I think, is 2 inches.
Yes.
Well, a simpler way to think about it would be just double that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you have that one correct.
Yeah, right. All right. But you apply it in the same way. Now, what I would do is, because this is curly, I would fuse the two raw edges of the piping together first using fusee web, so that these edges would be very flat. And then I would fusee web the folded piping onto the garment. So you're doing a double layer of fusee web. But then it's the same process of sewing it down. This time the left edge of your presser foot is along the fold, and all of the raw edges are on the outside edge. So where do you put that? How do you know where to put it if you want to do what has been done on this shirt? So I've indicated there's a left side seam and a right side seam. They're both in the same place on the pattern, that they're clearly indicated as the left and right side seams. So this is the edge where the trim goes. And the raw edge, whether you're using folded or single, lines up with the cut edge of whatever size you're doing. So that's super easy to remember, and you don't have to think about it anymore. We did it for you. So this garment is basically the same garment as out of the pattern. It just has narrower sleeve, and the sleeves have been pieced a bit, and the trim has been added. And other than that, the instructions are absolutely the same of how to assemble and get going. Once you do the very first seam, then it all becomes, you know what to do. But that first seam is like, what? Okay, I'll do it. You have to do it. And then once you pass the first seam, it all falls into place. So let's see, have I told you everything? Yes, I think I have told you everything about all of that. So shall we look at some fabric, or do we have questions? Or
We do have some questions.
Okay.
How do you do a rounded back on this pattern?
I don't know if you can. I think that question came up last week. You're probably not going to be able to do the traditional rounded back adjustment, which happens across here. I would simply probably add to the bottom and make the bottom curved a little bit. You could probably raise the back neck a little bit as well, but I don't think you're going to be able to split this and spread it like we do.
What about forward rounded shoulders?
All right, relax about all this, you guys. This is not a garment that you can do a lot of work on shoulders. There's no shoulder seam, so there would be no particular reason to change forward shoulder adjustments or shoulder seam placements. There's no shoulder seam.
How do you shorten the sleeves? I normally shorten about 2 inches.
All right, you would find the center of this sleeve from about here to here, which really is pretty close to right here. That line, we'll just use that line. So you would fold the pattern 1 inch and keeping that straight of grain line lined up, tape that together, and then just reconnect those lines from here to here.
Could you do this with woven fabric?
You know, it's interesting. I always thought no, but this is a pattern that was inspired by something I saw with Ronalda Shamask years ago. And the original garments were in silk charmeuse. So the answer is yes, you can do it beautifully in wovens. I wouldn't do it in particularly stiff wovens. I would think about drapey, flowy fabrics. And I might go up a size, perhaps, to get the flow of the fabric. But I've seen it in silk charmeuse, and it's gorgeous.
Do you have to take off some seam allowance for adding the piping insert?
No. No, the piping width that you cut includes the same seam allowance, 5/8 of an inch. So if you have a 5/8 inch seam allowance and 3/8 of the piping is going to show, you're going to cut it 1 inch and you're going to line up the raw edges.
Can you lengthen this into a dress or a tunic?
Yes, perhaps, yes. This is longer, and you can continue to go as long as you want. It would be great as a long dress or tunic. Perhaps Betsy can maybe at some point find where I've talked about how you lengthen it. Here are the lengthen and shorten lines on it right here. That's where you would lengthen this for tunic or dress. And you would cut this apart. First of all, you would extend this grain line and keep going for as long as you want. Cut the pattern across here, lengthen it however many inches you want, matching the straight of grain line when you put this bottom section back on. And then you would have to, again, true up these lines from the straight part here to the straight point at the bottom. But we did that on a Facebook Live at some point, and I'm sure that we can find that, or you can find that as well.
Could the body be a knit and the trim woven?
Probably. I might consider doing the trim on the bias, so it has a little give to it, but probably so. I think it depends on the knit you're using. If it's a super slinky, drapey, droopy knit, then a woven would maybe hang it up a little bit, but I think for most knits you're going to use for this garment, it would work just fine.
So how much yardage do you need to use all three of those fabrics?
You need 1 yard of each. 1 yard for the front, 1 yard for the back, and 1 yard for whatever else you're going to do.
Can you top stitch the insertions?
Sure.
How much did you decrease the sleeve size?
I would say it's been decreased by, there's 1.5 inches, probably about 3 inches.
Okay, looks like they found the link to the lengthening.
Okay.
So Betsy's going to post that.
Yeah, I think they're about 3 inches less in circumference.
Did you cut the trim on the bias?
No, because if the stripe were on the bias, it would be on the diagonal, which you can do if you want that look. That's a great look. But no, this trim was cut on the lengthwise so that the stripes were going like this.
And you wouldn't need to necessarily cut it on the bias for any sort of stretch.
No, stretch.
Because it's a knit.
A knit fabric, the bias on a knit fabric is essentially the same as crosswise or lengthwise stretch. So bias is only for looks in the case of a knit, and not because you need the stretch. The reason you need the yard of this is because you have to cut the trim, or we cut the trim at least, going this direction. And since the trim goes clear across here, that's about a yard, if you're wondering why you need so much.
You might, Kathy says, you might point out that the trim, this is not Kathy Davis, Kathy Miller, might point out that the trim stands up in the seam. It doesn't lie flat between the pieces. And I don't know if people are confused.
Now what now?
Confused by that point. That the trim, I wonder if some people think that the trim is just a piece, like in between both fabrics, versus something that stands out.
Oh, it's loose.
It's right, or loose.
Yeah, this
That's
is loose.
another way to describe it.
Yeah, here.
Let's get a close-up of it, of the trim.
Okay. Yeah, this is just 3/8 of an inch is loose of this trim. It's not sewn down on the edge. It's not inserted in between two pieces of fabric. Same way on this.
That one's a little easier to see
Is
because
it?
of the single
Okay.
layer in the wrong side.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I never thought about that. Ooh, that'd be tough. That would be some tough sewing.
That'd be some math that I don't
That'd
wanna
be some
figure
math,
out.
yeah.
Okay. Would it be affected by how you press it? Maybe you...
No, I mean, the way you're placing it here, it's going to lie in the right direction when you assemble it.
How much stretch do you add to the neckline fabric?
Well, we use this formula of 7/8%, meaning that our bindings are 7/8 as long as the circumference of the neck, so they're smaller.
And that's the pattern piece.
That's the
so-
pattern piece. I've never had to adjust the binding on this garment. I'm wearing a little t-shirt under here today for warmth, so I think some of my black is peeking out. But you can see the shape of the neckline right here.
How do you add side seam width when the seams wrap around?
All right, so here's a right side seam, and if you need more in the hip, you would come down here and you'd go like this. You just keep adding at where it says seams, left side seam, right side seam, just start under the arm and make it and come out wider. You can come out to another size. Like you could start, let's say, at the small here, and you could come out to, or a small here and come out to a medium. You could come out to a large, come out to an extra large, but still connecting to whatever size you are under the arm.
Could you add a bust dart?
You probably could, but I wouldn't bother.
What's the fabric for the purple Helix?
That is just a purple cotton jersey.
And what kind of thread did you use for the?
Yeah, I think I used embroidery floss, but let's look. It's been a while since I did this. Yeah, I used 4 strands of, or no, 2 strands. I can't even count embroidery. 4 strands of embroidery floss, regular DMC embroidery floss, something like that.
Is it possible to pull the neckline in a bit?
Sure. Yeah, you can draw this smaller. You know, you can bring these seams up a little bit and reconnect. You can make this bigger. You can transfer another neckline shape onto it. Yeah, you can do that.
Did you add light interfacing to the cowl neckline of the purple?
No, I rarely. No, not on a knit. I wouldn't. And this particular cotton knit's pretty not as drapey as like rayon knits. So to me, it wouldn't need it.
Okay, I don't see any other questions.
Okay. All right. Well, let's look at some fabric. All right, so as I said, I have these 2 on. Here's another series of colorways. All of these really work together. This one happens to be the same background color as this one, and the stripes are a different width and spacing. This is a pinstripe that's about 1 inch apart. These are a little bit bigger stripe, about 1/2 inch apart. This was the fabric for the piping. But you could also do it in more monochromatic tones. We have just the opposite of, if you're not as much of a mustard fan, but you know, I think the kick of this color is really interesting, and as piping, anybody can wear it. So you could use this variation of the stripe. Instead of the mustard and black, it would be the black with the mustard. This one is basically the same as this, just the opposite, so you could use those together. There's all kinds of possibilities, really. We pulled this out because if you're not into stripes, you could use this either as a portion of the garment or as the trim, as the piping. Same with this. If you don't like the stripe idea, this color is what goes with all of it. So all of these are rayon and spandex. The only one is, this is rayon and bamboo, super drapey. This one has a rib texture. I hesitate to call it a rib knit because we think of that as being kind of heavy, and it's not. This does have a rib texture. So there's all kinds of combinations here, I think, that are really fun to use. Or you can use any singular one of them and just simply make a striped top, all the same fabric. So you don't have to mix it up. There happens to be a seam right here, but you would never see it if it's planned just right.
The solid, I think they're talking about the solid green. What color do we call that?
We call this moss.
It says
Yeah, it's
Somebody said avocado. I don't know if maybe that got changed from when we did the tags.
Oh, really? Okay, maybe.
They're just clarifying.
It says avocado on the website.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they're just
This
clarifying
one
what they're
says
saying.
avocado.
Oh, maybe that's the one they're talking about. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, you know, it's a funny, we have trouble coming up with this word for this. Citrus. It's a grayed out mustard. This one has a little more green in it than this one. This one has more yellow. This is a little brighter. This is a little more subdued.
So someone said that they love that one, maybe the avocado stripe, but she said, I can't imagine matching those stripes.
Well, you don't have to match them at all.
Yeah,
well,
that's what I was going to ask.
There's no matching of stripes on this garment anywhere. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Even if you use this fabric for both pieces and the whole garment, there's no matching of stripes. So that's off the table.
That's the beauty of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, let me see if there's any other questions. Is the shirt you're wearing the length of the pattern?
Yes.
Okay. Benjamin Moore calls it citrus burst.
There you go.
That's what Catherine Witt said. That's a good name.
Yeah, sometimes paint colors have the best names. I think they all sit around in a room for years and years and think of paint names. Yeah. But this one and this one are the same color of mustard.
Another question about the stripes matching. So it appears, I think, on the black and white and gray one that you had to match some stripes on that one.
No, it just happened. Mm-hmm. Well, honestly, possibly it was laid out so that, well, no, there's no matching here. See how that goes off right there? Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no matching. It's just a lands how it lands. No matching here.
I think if it appears to be, it just got lucky.
Yeah. Yeah. Look at this seam. See this seam? There's no matching here on this seam. I think that would be impossible to match. I think that's just something you cannot worry about with this garment.
Okay, I don't see any other questions.
All right. So all the fabrics are on sale this week that we have on the wall. And the Helix pattern, which is a printed pattern, is on sale. And don't forget that it has the great pants that go with it. So you get both pieces in the pattern. So?
We have one more.
Okay.
Are the stripes on the lighter blue black or navy?
Well, I'm going to say they're black because Betsy says they're black. Well, this says midnight. Now I'm confused. So, Betsy, what color's midnight?
You can answer.
Oh, man, I don't know. Well, obviously, I'm wearing my black Picasso pants with this outfit. I didn't feel the need to find blue pants. So I'm not sure whether this is black or dark blue, but I'm wearing black with it, and I thought that was the color that worked with it the best. So I'm going to say it's black.
Oh, Betsy says black.
Okay.
Midnight black.
All right. Great.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks so much for joining me today. I appreciate it, and we'll see you next Tuesday.